Good evening, Austin, Texas. My name is Adam Sparks, and I am with AISD for All. AISD for All is a diverse coalition of parents, educators, and community leaders working to promote equity and social justice in the Austin Independent School District. Our goal is to amplify the voices of all students, families, and educators within AISD and to shine a light on issues facing the district's historically marginalized communities. We seek to engage the wider community on these topics, encourage informed voting in school board elections, and advocate for a strong public education for all students. We are conducting these candidate forums so community members can get to know candidates better and understand where they stand on issues of importance to all of us. After the live broadcast, you can view all of the candidate forums and clips of each question and set of answers at our website, aisdforall.org/voterguide, or on our Facebook page at facebook.com/aisdforall/videos. Let me start with an important statement. School board elections matter. While most voters will be going to the polls to vote for the president, senators, and the like, your vote has the most weight and the most impact on local elections. In District 2, less than 20,000 votes will decide which of these three candidates you'll see before you tonight will represent the 80,000 students in AISD. If you care about social justice, you need to care about social justice and education, and informing yourself on the candidates and how they plan to lead AISD is the first step. If you are voting in D2, you will also have the opportunity to vote for an at-large trustee in District 8, so please tune in to our District 8 candidate forum next Thursday, October 1st, 2020. Thank you. Now we have just a few basic rules for the forum. We ask the candidates to please respond directly to the content matter of the question posed and direct their answers only to the moderator and the viewers. Please do not interrupt your fellow candidates, and please only speak during your allotted time. This is how it'll work logistically. Each candidate will be given 1 minute to introduce themselves and tell us why they are running. I'll then begin asking a series of 6 to 8 questions. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes to respond to each question, and we'll rotate the order in which the candidates respond. The moderator may ask a follow-up question for which the candidate will have 1 minute to respond. And then before moving on to a new question, if there's something else you'd like to add, please raise your hand and we'll allow you 20 additional seconds to make your point. The timekeeper will inform you when you have 30 seconds left and when your time has ended. So we will begin. We will go in the order of Andy, John, and Ofelia, and we will ask you in 1 minute or less to please tell us who you are and why you are running.
Good evening to everyone. My name is Adolphus Andy Anderson, and I am running for District 2 trustee for Austin Independent School District. I've been a longtime resident of Austin for over 30 years. I have 2 children who've gone through the AISD public school system, have graduated and gone on to college and doing greater things. I want to run for District 2 because it is probably the most underrepresented district within AISD. When it comes to a lack of resources and support, District 2 has not been given what I consider a fair shake at the board level, and now is the time for us to change that. So I am hoping for your support in serving in that capacity. Thank you.
Ofelia, please. And let me unmute you. It's still muted. If you can try doing it again on your end. Sorry about that.
I'm sorry. Good evening. My name is Ofelia Zapata. I am an Austinite, and I've lived in the District 2 community for the last 30 years, working side by side with parents and community on addressing issues that affect the quality of life and also advocating on education issues. I am running because I am a mother and grandmother who has been advocating for the last 30 years and still have 2 granddaughters in the district that I hope that we would be able to make some systemic changes that are long overdue. Thank you.
And now, John.
Good evening, and thank you for this forum. My name is John McKiernan-Gonzalez. I am a father of a 5th grader in Dawson Elementary, married to a teacher. I come from a family of teachers, and I've been living in D2 since 2005. I'm running because 12 months ago, the school district decided to formalize its hostility to Black and Latino majority schools and closed 12 schools, 4 of which were in D2, demonstrating physically the kind of indifference it's been demonstrating for the last 45 to 50 years as well. My slogan is un distrito que eduque a todos, que trate bien a la gente y que crezca con la ciudad. An ISD that teaches everybody, treats people well, and grows with the city. And I think we can do this, and we can make D2 the place where this will happen.
Thank you all very much. We're going to ask our first question, and we'll go to John, and then Ofelia, and then to Andy. John, we'll begin with you. What, in your opinion, are the biggest challenges facing District 2 today?
I think Andy Anderson put the case well. It's the inequality. It's that District 2 suffered from a lack of representation for the last 8 years from our trustee, but more than that, it's taken for granted. We have the highest rent to income ratio in the district. We also have some of the highest COVID-19 rates in the district, and we have the challenges associated with that. We also have some wonderful schools that are taken for granted, that are doing great things for the students. And this is the kind of work that I think the district needs to take more seriously and embrace. So do I have 2 minutes?
You'd like to keep going.
So one of the reasons given for treating D2 so shabbily is under enrollment. The number of students in the D2 is growing, and the number of students in Austin is growing. And I think embracing the charter students and embracing students that are in the area to bring them into enrollment will allow D2 to thrive, and will sort of begin to allow teachers and staff and families to implement the kinds of programs like dual enrollment, enhanced sped attention, STEM, that students need and desire. And I think by changing the enrollment situation and bringing people in, and perhaps even changing boundaries to allow people to participate in these schools, we can change D2 in kind of a thriving example of what Austin can be.
Thank you. Ofelia, please. And Ofelia, you have the mute on.
Okay, thank you. I also agree with what John was saying. It's about it's equity, high equity and quality education is a priority for our district. We continue to have schools that bring the bar down instead of really challenging our kids. And I think that with this with the pandemic, it has been unveiled of the high inequities in our schools. Because our students are struggling with the virtual tablets and the hotspots, and all of that should have already been taken care of during the shutdown. And so I think it's the equity and ensuring our kids get the best quality education, but it's also helping ensure that all students, which means the special needs students who continue to get left behind, as I did. I graduated from high school being visually impaired, and I had to struggle with my son with special needs and my grandson, and things haven't changed. And so we continue to have to fight for those resources to ensure that the dyslexic, the special needs students don't get left behind, that everybody is given the equal, adequate education in our district.
Thank you, Ofelia. And Andy, the question to you again, what in your opinion are the biggest challenges facing District 2 today?
To me, there are a couple of things that are challenges that are facing District 2. The first is the fact that we have schools within District 2 that AISD may consider under-enrolled because we don't have enough students to fill them. Thus, we're being looked at as to closing those schools or trying to repurpose them for something else. When in actuality, one of the things that we could have done, or that we should be doing, is really looking at changing our boundaries to really balance the load across the district to providing that same quality education no matter which school you go to, whether it be in District 2, 1, or wherever it may be. The other thing that's also impacting District 2 that really kind of goes hand in hand with the city is affordability. A lot of our students they're either moving out of the district because parents cannot afford to live there as well. I think that by working with the city and housing, I think we can try to get more affordability to actually bring back our students to our campuses. That also kind of plays into the hand of charter schools. Charter schools target District 2 because they will say that we have areas where some of our schools are over-enrolled. And so they think, well, if you're in an over-enrolled class, then you're going to want somewhere where you get a little bit more one-on-one learning. Well, in order to really combat that, as a district, it's like that's where the balancing of the boundaries comes into play by really helping out, really putting students in those classrooms that really kind of balance out the district as well. The final thing that really is a challenge to District 2 is our disciplinary. We want to be sure to bring the disciplinary down so that we're not adding to the student to prison pipeline system that is crippling our children and allowing them the opportunity to succeed. So in AISD, if we say all means all, then that means that we need to give District 2 the same resource we need for all the other districts in the district. Thank you.
And candidate Andy, since you brought up school discipline, would you like to speak to SROs, student resource officers, who act as authorities in the school, and how you would like to see that implemented in the future?
The way I would like to see that implemented differently is that school resource officers are just that. They provide a resource to the students. Do you need help with something? Do you know where to go? Is someone causing you problems? It's like, is someone hindering your learning or your education? The student resource officer should not be looked upon as they're the police walking the halls and making sure that, you know, if someone is causing problems, then we send them off to the alternative learning center. We need to be more mindful of the issues that is causing students that are not being able to learn as they should. There needs to be more interventions for students to be able to sit down with a resource specialist to be able to say, what is keeping you from learning the way you want to learn? And by doing so, that will reduce our disciplinary rate, because now we don't have disruptive students in our classes. Now we have students that are willing and are engaged to learn, and that makes us all successful.
Thank you very much, candidates. Our second question is on school closings. Austin ISD recently closed 4 campuses permanently, including Brook and Metz in D2, and 8 more were discussed as possible closures at a later date. Specifically looking at Brook and Metz elementaries, what have you learned about school closures during this process, and how would you approach future decisions regarding school closures as a trustee? The order will be Ofelia, Andy, and then John, and you'll each have 2 minutes. We'll begin with Ofelia. The mute is on.
What I have learned through the campaign process is that parents in the community were not heard, that it was already a decision made from the top, as it's always been. It's a top-down way of making decisions in this district. They have community meetings for the sake of saying we had community meetings, but they're not really listening to the community. And so part of what needs to change is that there needs to be some respect for the community's voice and to be part of the decision makers of anything that's going on in their campus. And, you know, they say we want community engagement, but that definition is not the same definition as I see as community engagement, where you really invite people at the table and everybody is being part of the solution. And so that's what I would want to change, is that the community be respected and always be part of what is going on, what is coming down at the beginning, not at the end, and that they are the experts of that community. They're the experts of the children's education. And so the district needs to begin to really listen and engage so that there will be a successful district and rebuilding of those relationships of trust, so that we can be a role model district for other school districts. Thank you.
Thank you. Andy, please.
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, the process by which they want to do school closures was not perfect. It was not perfect because, first of all, we did not look at, did we do everything else beforehand before we even considered closing schools? And that's why I relate to boundaries. We could have looked at boundaries for District 2 and really across the entire district to kind of help load balance that before we even started the discussion about closing schools. But even serving as co-chair of the Boundary Advisory Committee for the district, that was not our charge. It's like we're given specific instructions on what we're to work on, even though we know there are other issues out there that could actually impact those things in the district. Because as I've said before, what happens in one area impacts everything within the district. So, so that should have been the first thing we looked at, which we were not able to do. The second thing, which I think is really more critical, is communication. When it comes to communication in the district, it is not about the parents being on the district's time to get feedback and input. The district needs to understand they need to be on the parents' time because we have children, we need to feed them, we need to make sure they're taken care of before we can actually get engaged in those other things that are impacting their success and their education. So I think going forward, if I would do anything different, is that before we even start talking about school closures, let's make sure we have crossed all those other paths with community engagement and input first before doing so. Because I believe that if the learning is the same across the entire district, no matter which school you're at, then by balancing the load across the district at the schools, you will get the same quality education on the east side of Austin as you would on the west side of Austin. Thank you.
Thank you. And John, let me just read the question for you once again here. Austin AISD recently closed 4 campuses permanently, including Brook and Metz in D2, and 8 more were discussed. Specifically looking at Brook and Metz, what have you learned about school closures during this process, and how would you approach future decisions regarding school closures as a trustee?
The first thing I'd like to point out is that there was actual community engagement in the process. The question is, which communities were engaged? The director of the FAFPAC committee, Jennifer Littlefield, and Leticia Moreno Caballero were deeply involved in crafting the FAFPAC proposals, bringing in people from different places where they suggested that certain schools needed to be closed because it would cost too much to keep them going. FAFPAC also said that every measure needs to be taken before schools are closed, but they made a ringing reason to start closing schools, which is the reasons why Ted Gordon, Jamie Matias, and Paul Saldana all voted against the recommendations of FAFPAC, yet the school district went ahead over the districts where the schools would be closed. So there was community engagement, but it was their vision of what a quality school would be. Those quality schools were glass walls, open classrooms, and kind of a panopticon where supervisors can see what's going on, recipe for distraction for students. So people were caught up in the vision of these schools, but not actually consulting parents with kids with SPED, not actually consulting teachers about what kind of school they would want. And third of all, I don't think they value the kind of education that these smaller, more politically vulnerable schools provide. These are anchors. These are places where parent support specialists are the heroes of the district. These are places where parents go out of the way looking for food and other things to get people going. They're part of the home that people make in Austin, whether you're transferring from Del Valley, transferring from Manor, or just crossing district lines to be part of these smaller schools because your grandparents went to these schools. This value is priceless, and instead FAFPAC and the school closures put a price on real estate, not realizing that real estate is going to be much more expensive 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the line when parents will start putting their kids back into Austin ISD.
Thank you all. Let me issue a follow-up question. If anyone would like to answer, please just raise your hand and you'll have a minute to respond to it. With Metz Elementary, they were co-campusing with another school, and part of their move was moving into newer buildings. For Brook, it was a different scenario. I'd like you to speak specifically to your experience with families at Brook and their students, and what you've learned from engaging with those members who aren't returning to their campus this fall. Would anyone like to take that up with a minute? All right, we'll start with John, and if the other candidates would like to, please just raise your hand when he is done. John, thank you.
Andy Anderson helped design the targeted utilization program in there, and Brook parents and Brook families and Brook teachers met and exceeded the targeted utilization programs in a school with a high SPED population and building in a science curriculum. They did everything right, and the school district still shut them down. So the kind of trauma and pain and distrust of Austin ISD is deep in that way. They still believe in it, they still are part of this, but they still feel that the Austin district does not listen to them. For Mets, having your school being co-located and bringing in kids from Sanchez and then suddenly being told, well, we're gonna go along with what's already been physically in place, it's a really difficult thing to challenge. And maybe some parents are excited about that, but I think it was a very difficult choice to go along with that. But really, if the district is gonna ask people to live up to certain standards and you live up to those standards, and then the district rejects those standards for real estate values, it really tells you what district values.
Thank you. Would another candidate like to respond specifically to their interactions with families and students at Brook and Metz? All right, well then we will move on to our third question, which is about enrollment and charter schools. This will be the first of a two-part question specifically focusing on charter schools in D2. For the 3 years from 2016 to 2019, AISD District 2 schools have lost over 1,700 students, while charter schools cited in D2 have gained nearly 1,500 students. If this trend continues, District 2 will be the first trustee district where AISD educates fewer students than charter schools. Why do you think this is? And as a trustee, how would you hold the superintendent accountable for increasing AISD enrollment? We'll go in the order of Andy, and then John, and then Ofelia.
Okay, it's an interesting question because with some of the parents that I've spoken with, taking their children to charter schools was usually because of an experience at an AISD campus in which there was some issues where there was a lack of communication, whether it be with the teachers or understanding what the student needs are. And some parents felt like, well, if they took their children to a different campus, maybe they can get a different type of learning. So therefore, they would take it to a charter school rather than take it to another AISD campus. But I believe that one of the reasons why we have charter schools are continuing inundating our area is because as AISD, we're not celebrating the successes of what our campuses can actually do and what we can actually provide. A lot of the resources that we provide at AISD, charter schools cannot. And because of that, it's like we're not putting that out there where charter schools are having billboards where they're advertising, hey, come to our campus and do this and do that. AISD is not doing the same for its campuses. In order to kind of turn that around, we need to be able to put the word out there that yes, this is what our campus can do. These are the resources we can provide your student to make it a whole child experience. We want the children to know that whatever their need is, education-wise, we can meet it. And if we can't meet it, we'll do everything we can to get it so that we can meet it. But because by doing that, then we're able to bring our students back to our campuses. But that also goes to the fact of we need to be able to work with the city to provide affordable housing for our students to be able to stay at our campuses so that they can go to school there as well. Thank you.
Let me ask you a follow-up question on that. For the second part of our question is, how would you hold the superintendent accountable for increasing AISD enrollment? You mentioned communication and selling the schools. What else, though, would you do to ensure that the superintendent make that a priority? And you have a minute to respond.
What I would do to hold the superintendent accountable for that is to look at the data to ensure that the students' learning is actually increasing. Even though I know we are being measured on certain things, it's like there should be an increase in their learning and in their participation, whether it be in attendance, whether it be in their core subjects, as to the students are actually wanting to be at school, they're wanting to learn, and that all goes back to the superintendent providing the resources to the campuses to ensure the students have what they need.
Thank you. And now to John. If the trend continues, District 2 will be the first trustee district where AISD educates fewer students than charter schools. Why do you think this is? And as a trustee, how would you hold the superintendent accountable for increasing AISD enrollment?
Over the summer, the Board of Trustees spent, I don't know, maybe a month and a half crafting a scorecard for the superintendent to reflect sort of like what the superintendent was going to do. I think that scorecard did not put the issues of D2, D3, D1, and D6 front and center. There needs to be a scorecard that addresses the SPED issues that families in D2 face. There needs to be a scorecard that talks about the ways that dual language can be enhanced and increased for all the Spanish language speaking parents in this district. There needs to be a scorecard that looks at the ability to incorporate and implement programs that speak to STEM and creative arts in the schools that are already there. Is our superintendent living up to the mission of the school district? Educating all the students in D2 to allow them to become the best they can be. So this question you put there is really stark, that more students will be in charter schools than not in our district if the trend continues. And I think this is the kind of thing that should make a superintendent shake in their boots. D2 needs to be front and center in these ways. So it's not just D2 itself and advertising to charters and appealing to parents in terms of addressing the needs that Andy Anderson put in there, but it needs to be a district-wide commitment that if D2 is losing students, schools out in West Austin are also losing revenue. And West Austin needs to buy into the success of East Austin for us, AISD for all.
And let me follow up with you then on the first part. What is your understanding of why charter schools are increasing enrollment heavily in D2 while AISD is decreasing enrollment? Can you speak to your understanding of that?
I think charters, my friends who go to charters, they find it more homely. They find that the promises are more straightforward. There may be less bureaucracy. There's a sense that people are being involved, but they're not being told that if your child has a disability, they can be expelled. They're not being told that if there's disciplinary histories, they won't be allowed in charters. I think parents like to give their children a fair shake, and they need to understand that with pressure, Austin ISD can give their kids a fair shake in D2 schools.
Thank you. And the question back to Ofelia now.
Okay, from the community perspective, I have heard many parents that have moved their children to charter schools because it is it's because of their work and their neighbor or their comadre or somebody is able to help them and to with their child to be in school, and so they move them for accommodations. Sometimes it's not because of their being promoted to them, but it's for convenience to help parents who have to work and can't pick up their kids, don't have childcare, and there aren't those kind of resources in our neighborhood in District 2, and specifically Dove Springs. Also, there's a lot of bullying, gangs, still activities like that in the schools. And so they feel like the charter schools don't have that. And so they're more strict. They say, they don't even let them be on their phones. And so there are some tactics that we should be doing. And, and I even thought that when I was PTA at Eastside, why don't we try to do, not talk to parents, for students to not use their phones because they have tablets and all the work is going to be on tablets. They don't need their phones. But oh my God, there was no way we were going to have that kind of campaign because parents were totally against it. I want to be able to talk to my son when I call him and those kinds of things. So we have to give and take as community as well. Do we want high education for our students? Then we need to make some sacrifices too and buckle down on some disciplinary stuff, basic things that we can do as community to support our schools so our students aren't disruptive or distracted in this classroom. There isn't enough of promoting our schools. I know I did an event at Cinco de Mayo to promote Eastside and, and another event several events to promote our school. The district needs to be on board with us in those promotions, and they need to be big and wide. And so to lift up the great things that we are doing to attract families to come back. And I think how I would hold the district superintendent accountable is that let's have these conversations with parents. Parents, what is it gonna, what is it gonna take to have our kids stay in public schools? We lost Mendez. I've been in that neighborhood for 30 years and never knew the seriousness of how Mendez was not performing. That should have never happened. And so that's something that I really want to stay focused on, because a lot of parents do not want their kids to go to Mendez now. So how are we going to change that picture? And so that's a conversation to have with the district and the board as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me now follow up to all of you with another question, so 2 minutes, also on the issue of charters. We understand the AISD does not always sufficiently address the needs of all students. Is the only remedy for charter schools to come in and fill the gaps? Or do you think AISD is capable of serving the needs of all students? We're going to go to John, and then Ofelia, and then Andy. You're muted, John.
Is Austin ISD able to fill the needs for all students? That is a really big and nearly existential question. I think given that we have one of the top high schools in the country, it's possible to do that. And there are children in that high school with disabilities who are doing really well. I think in one of the wealthiest districts in Texas, we can find ways to distribute that money really easily. And one of the nice things about being the most racially segregated and income unequal district in Austin is that desegregating will be quicker and easier in terms of geography. It'll just require people to be in some of these other highly rated by the number schools, moving their kids to schools that are receiving the resources to be able to treat other people well. There's advocacy groups, impressive advocacy groups, pushing the district on special ed, pushing the district on bilingual education and dual immersion, pushing the district on problem solving and narrative ways of doing this, that I think together with the nonprofits like in communities and schools, with parents, and with making low income and Title I schools the priority for the district, that we can change this and make Austin the kind of bubble so many people think it is, but it isn't.
Thank you. So let me just then follow up with 1 minute for your response. Is there a role for charter schools in Austin?
Is there a role for charter schools in Austin? There is a role for charter schools in the TEA. There is a role for charter schools in the governor's office in sense of what public education is. And charter schools are part of the ecosystem because of these larger structural reasons. So the role right now as it exists is that it provides an escape for people from schools in right now. It provides a home for students that don't find a home for themselves in Austin ISD. It provides for some people a chance to innovate and reform in ways that Austin ISD doesn't allow people for a number of reasons. But I think things like schools like Travis Heights shows that you can have in-district charters with the Education Austin to try to be successful and do the kind of education that both teachers, staff, families, and students buy into.
Thank you. Now to Ofelia. Do you think AISD is capable of serving the needs of all students, or is the only remedy for charter schools to come in and fill the gaps?
I think AISD is capable, but not alone. I think there have been models that were created back in the 90s called the Alliance Schools with Austin Interfaith, where they really brought in a core group of people within this campus, the community, the churches, and they all work together to build that community of learners. There's a model that was successful effective, and it just didn't continue. A new superintendent comes in and there's a new vision. So there's always new ideas, but there isn't really hanging on to things that really worked, things that were successful. And so until they are open, you know, I've been in the schools for the last 30 years, and many schools are not welcoming. They don't want you there. They want parents to, to come buy t-shirts and do PTA little activities, but don't ask me questions. Until there's that respect of the parents' voice, the community being a real partner. And when we say, when I say, you know, let's have a community meeting. Well, when I say a community meeting, I mean the people, I mean the parents, I mean the grandparents, I mean the business leaders, the faith community, to be there with that campus, because we all care about the future of our students' education. But when the district says community, it's all nonprofits. Okay, so there's a big disconnect there. And so until we can get on the same page to work together and to be acknowledged with and respecting that everyone can really create this community of learners, then it's going to continue to be that challenge. And the parents will go on to charter schools because they don't feel that respect in their community and in that school.
Thank you. Let me follow up with you, Ofelia. You had submitted a letter to the TEA supporting Learn for Life, which is a charter school looking to open a campus in Austin. Can you speak to your support of this charter while running to be an AISD trustee?
For the last 4 years, I've been in PTA at Eastside Memorial High School, and we were creating this holistic approach to health and wellness that's going to have that safety net to ensure high quality education, but to also address the health and wellness piece, because after student surveys, student interviews, and partner people from the UT Med School, and we had interns that came, and you know, a lot of conversations, and everything led to mental health was a priority to work with our students. Well, this was the year, 2020 was the year to implement. The health director from AISD squashed it, said, no, we're not doing it. That summer, I was at a social justice ministry meeting and with other churches, and I heard about Learn for Life. It was exactly what we were trying to build at Eastside Memorial. The district squashed it. I went up to the superintendent, said we need to have a meeting. We had 25 stakeholders ready to do the work. We're not asking for any money. We're not asking, we're just saying, support us, give us the blessing so we can move forward and provide this amazing experience for Eastside Memorial. And he just deferred to the director of health services. So when I learned about Learn for Life, I wanted to know more. How were they doing this? And that's where I learned it was its own charter school. Well, I really liked it because it is what we need. I have seen so many students get kicked out of AISD. And even though I liked it, I wanted to make sure that community wanted it, because it wasn't about what I wanted. It was about, is there a need? When I organized walkers to walk that Bromberg area, within 3 days, we got 500 signatures. Students told us stories of how they wanted to go back to school, how they messed up, but the district will not let them come back. Too many of those stories. Why? Why is that the district kicks out our kids to the curb? These are all the throwaway kids that have been dropped out 2-3 years and had no hope to coming back to AISD because they were told they could not come back.
Thank you very much for your answers. Sorry to interrupt you.
That's okay.
Let me just then, if you don't mind briefly saying then, assuming that you become a trustee, these are things you would push for AISD to try and create, and you felt that you supported the charter because AISD was not able to?
It does not exist. Yes. And yes, thank you.
I appreciate it. And now to you, Andy. The question is, we understand that AISD does not always sufficiently address the needs of all students. Is the only remedy for charter schools to come in and fill the gaps? Or do you think AISD is capable of serving the needs of all students?
I do not think, let me rephrase that. AISD can meet the needs of all students, but I want everybody to understand that it takes more than just money. Certainly AISD has a large budget, and that budget provides for resources for our campuses. But when it comes to supporting our children, it also takes time. And not just time that the teachers are providing and mentioning, but time that even we as parents are providing as well by providing our input as to our children's success. I think that as we move forward, we can look at AISD's budget and say we need resources here. And I don't want nobody to think that, oh, we throw some money at it and then that's going to fix the problem. That is not always the solution. Time that we put into utilizing those resources is what fixes the solution. So if we as a district, especially in District 2, can do that, then we as a district will be better off in the long haul. You know, I've been in the Dove Springs area for 30 years. And I remember when Mendez when they first did not meet AYP for performance. I sat on the committee, and by that next year, we were off that list. And I was happy about it. It's like, okay, a glitch, give us the resources we need and we'll fix it. And then all of a sudden, administration changes, and now all of a sudden we're right back to where we were. And we're like, what happened? So a lot of times it's like, I don't want to let's just keep throwing money at the problem to fix it. We also need to throw our time to fix it as well. And if we do that, then charter schools, they can occupy other places like maybe Houston, which may need their support a lot more because they're a much larger district than we are, you know, in doing so as well. Thank you.
Let me follow up with the same question that I asked John then. Is there a role for charter schools in Austin, Texas?
To me, no, there's not a role for charter schools. It is merely just another choice, but it's a choice that AISD students do not have to make. Austin ISD can provide the support and the resources that every student needs to be successful.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to our next question, which is about dual language. The order will be Ofelia, Andy, and then John. Around half of the students in District 2 are labeled as English language learners or emerging bilinguals. What is your vision for dual language programming in AISD? And what steps can AISD take to ensure that dual language programming best serves native Spanish speakers? And again, Ofelia, then Andy, then John.
So I used to serve as a representative when I was at Aikens High School for this, for parents. And that's another area that is very isolated. It's an area, it's a program that parents are, again, they're not engaged in how they could help the students in this program. So I think that as a district, it's just doing some evaluation of how we can better improve and get our students to feel part of the school. At Eastside, when I was calling parents, Spanish-speaking parents to a meeting, after spring break, a lot of their kids didn't come back. And they said, because, you know, I'm always teased. People make fun of me because I can't speak English. And so there has to be something that we can do so that students are not feeling a burden because they don't speak the language, but that instead to lift up their intelligence. I had a senior that graduated at 14 by herself, paying rent and having to work. and she had to learn English, and she was an amazing student. She wants to start her own business. So there are so many talented students and the program, and so we have to figure out how does that program also ensure that the students are also having success in their other classes, because the program is helpful, but there has to be other ways to help them feel engaged and respected in regular classes with the other students.
Thank you for that. Let me ask you a follow-up for 1 minute. Just again, what is your larger vision for dual language? If 4 years from now, what do you hope has been accomplished? Expanding dual language options through high school, that sort of thing.
Oh, absolutely. The dual language is a big issue right now in Dove Springs. The elementary schools all have dual language. Parents want to continue. They're having success with their students, but the feeder school is Mendez. So I would like to figure out, how do we get Mendez to also have dual language, because that is their feeder school. And if they don't have transportation, they are forced to go to Mendez and lose that program. And if they have transportation, they can go to Paderes or Lively. So it is very important that we ensure that as many schools that want the program, that they are able to get it, and especially the middle school, that the students are in the feeder pattern, that they are be able to continue that particular program.
Thank you. Now the question to Andy.
Thank you. I think that in AISD, dual language has played a vital part in really helping our students be successful. We have certainly seen it successful within District 2. And I think that as a district, we need to really expand it to all our campuses. Because as we are educating our children to compete in a global market, especially with the way our economy is, they need to learn, they need to be able to speak more than just the language of English, and probably even more so than the language of Spanish. I say we need to be able to speak other languages well. So I am in favor of providing more resources and support for dual language as well as multi-language support. It's like, it is my hope that as a district, that when every child leaves AISD, they can speak at least 3 languages, English, Spanish, and something else, that will help them compete in a world, especially that is really not being confined by you have just no English or Spanish. I think that I know we have struggles trying to find bilingual teachers. I know that we try to get them where we need them, but we need more. And to do that, we need to be able to look at, are we utilizing our dollars to try to get the best and to retain the best? That's where our teachers comes in. And especially those that speak other languages, such as Mandarin or Chinese or French or something like that. We need to be able to accommodate those people, those students as well, because they all play a part in making AISD a great district. Thank you.
Thank you. And let me follow up then. Specifically on the second part of the question, how can dual language best serve native Spanish speakers? That's about half of the students in D2. What things can be done to make sure that the program has fidelity towards that mission, that part of the mission?
The way that can actually help is that when you're in a classroom or in that type of setting, if the information is being provided in English and in that other language, then as students, they're able to see both. They're able to hear both. They're able to retain both. The information is now being consumed by the student because they just don't hear it in their own native language. They're hearing it in another language as well, the exact same information. And I think that by doing so, by having that collaboration, that allows our students to be more well-rounded as a student.
Thank you. And now for John, what is your vision for dual language programming in AISD, and what steps can AISD take to ensure that dual language best serves native Spanish speakers? John, you're muted.
First, I just want to say that schools are part of the society that surrounds them. So the United States is the 5th largest Spanish-speaking country in the world. People in Austin transact their lives in Spanish at work, in construction sites, and other places. Having schools reflect the public nature of Spanish in Texas and the private nature of people who speak Spanish at home and can bring Spanish to the school to communicate with their teachers, to communicate with the parent support specialists, to communicate to the front office people, opens up avenues and open up schools to parent engagement. Research shows that parents that are engaged in their schools is one of the best ways to create avenues for success for the students. So for me, dual immersion programs or Spanish immersion programs are a way of enhancing the abilities of parents, families, and students to be able to participate in the school and in the world. The other thing about dual immersion, when you see the research, when you see research in places that people sort of like do long-term studies, you see that special ed students prosper under dual language situations. You see African-American students prosper under dual language situations. You see that Spanish-speaking students prosper in these situations, and not just in language, but in science and social studies and other things. But the issue is with implementation. Me gustaría ver que toda la mesa directiva podría ir a una clase y entender lo que están enseñando ahí. What you need to know is what is actually being taught in these dual language classrooms. It needs to be a priority to make sure that the goals and requirements for dual language are being met. It is the state law, and it is necessary for the district to do this. So like Andy, I would love to see people graduate being able to excel in physics and Spanish and excel in physics and English, and somewhere else. I think we can do that. I think creating feeding patterns and do that is a good way to do it, but I think dual language is a way out of our particular situation.
Thank you, John. And let me just bring up the first part of that question again. What is your vision for dual language programming in AISD? How do you hope that you can, what do you hope to see for dual language programming if you were trustee for the next 4 years?
There was a push this summer to put dual language implementation and immersion as part of the scorecard for the supervisors, but it was not put in there. And I think dual language is more than sort of a way to anchor kids in elementaries. It's a way of seeing the world. So I'd like to see science in Spanish. I'd like to see arts in Spanish. I'd love to see sort of like these cutting edge theater that's coming out of Spain, Mexico, Colombia, being done in Spanish across the district. I see this as a way for the district to join the world, to join the ways in which sort of like treating dual language as an afterthought or something special that's being done is a disservice both to Spanish language students and other language students as well. It's an opportunity to be part of the Americas.
Thank you. Let me do a follow-up to any of the candidates who would like to respond, and you can have a minute to make your response here. I want to talk about the district's trend to no longer support dual language programs because of test scores. While the research does show that dual language programs is a net benefit to all students throughout the course of their education, when it's first being implemented, it can perhaps lower a school's assessment on test scores, and therefore the district is hesitant to support dual language. How would you make sure that the district doesn't jump off the ship too early because of test scores at this level? And if anyone would like to raise their hand, take a minute to respond to that. All right, we'll start with Andy.
I think that sometimes we are too quick to bail out of something when we try something new. I think that when it comes to dual language, I say we need to give things time to kind of pan out and not just, okay, let's try it for a year, and if it fails, okay, let's just get rid of it. We need to really see something go through a 3 to 5 year implementation to see how well it really does work before we decide, okay, do we need to invest more into it, or do we really need to look at something different, or has something changed that's better than what we're already doing right now? Thank you.
I just want to say that And as John mentioned about connecting the world to our children to the world, here in Austin, we need Spanish speaker attorneys. We just opened a private defender's office, and they're having to find attorneys that are Spanish speakers. The court reporters. There are such a big need in the healthcare for Spanish speakers. So it would be a shame, and it would be not. I would not want the district to close this dual language opportunity when there is such a big demand for in the workplace. Thank you.
Thank you. And John, again, specifically on what you could do to ensure that test scores don't derail dual language programs.
I think the fear of test score performance is part of a larger symptom that the district suffers, which is fear of test score performance. So the fear of poor test scores affects the way the dual language is taught, not as a robust kind of language, but how well will you do on the STAR test? Because if we don't do well on the STAR test, we'll lose our funding and this beautiful program we want to save will be gone. I think as a board, it needs to push back on test scores as a measure of performance. But also, I think that just people should see it. Like, would you cut science from high school just because science isn't being taught well in this school? Thinking about dual immersion in these places is thinking about it as being as essential a subject as SEL, as language arts, as social studies, and just being something that now, 10 years from now, this will be something that the district will say, this is part of our identity, this is what we do. And in fourth grade, we didn't do that great on test scores. Or actually in second grade, we didn't do that well. We caught up in fourth grade and we started excelling in junior high.
Thank you all. Let's talk about special education. AISD has around 10,000 students enrolled in special education. What does AISD need to do to best support these students and specifically special education staff? The order will be Andy, then John, then Ofelia.
What AISD needs to do is invest more resources into special education. It seems that we do not have enough people in the field to provide support to our special ed needs students. I've heard many stories, whereas caseworkers are stretched thin. There's not enough hours in the day for them to cover all the cases that they need to cover. And I think that is due to a lack of, we don't have enough people on the ground level to really provide that support necessary to get the resources that they're going to need. I think that the district can do better by really looking at the resource they have now and seeing really from our budget, where can we actually expand that? And it is not saying that we don't need as many administrators as we need people in the field. I say we do need both, but at this point, we need people in the field to get us the information so that we can really help our special needs students. We cannot afford to leave them behind. We will not leave them behind. So what we will do as a district, we need to say, we need more people to help out our people who are in the field doing special ed. There's people that are on the ground at the campuses who are really needing that support, whether they need more time, whether it's finding the bodies to do so, to provide that support for them so that we all as a district can succeed. Thank you.
Thank you. And as part of your answer, you mentioned additional funding for special education, and you talked about Austin's budget. AISD has spoken about the budget crunch for many years, and you mentioned administration. Is that a way that you think Austin can find more money for special education by finding it in the administration budget?
I would say yes. Certainly we have looked at our budget, whereas some would say that we're top heavy. We have a lot of administrators, but not enough people down at the ground level. I think that we can certainly look at our budget along those lines and certainly find the dollars necessary if needed and much needed to hire those people that we need to really provide that support at that lower level.
Thank you. And now to John. AISD has around 10,000 students in special education. What does AISD need to do to best support these students and specifically special education staff?
I think this is an important question, and it needs to be given the kind of attention that a Truth and Reconciliation Commission has done. Texas is recovering from the infamous 13% quota that said schools could only have 13% of their students meet disability and everyone else would be left out in the lurch. I think when I talk to parents of SPED students, the world they live in is infinitely more difficult, complicated, mistrusting, and really there's a lack of faith in the process. But other parents don't see this. They don't see the ways in which this. So I'd love to see ways to have SPED communications and general communications be incorporated so that people can see the kinds of conversations that are done. In Mexico, we call this destapo. This needs to be open so people can see what SPED students do. The other thing is, I have faith that students and teachers can see the different ways in which SPED students are negotiating and will support them. And I think it's up to the principals, the teachers, and the high echelons to start modeling the ways in which people can learn together in classrooms to do the process. And then third, I can't say this because I'm not a SPED staff member, but I do think SPED staff members have been taken for granted, been treated as disposable. They brought in more expensive consultants to make up for the fact that they have a fairly toxic workplace environment because of the high turnover of SPED staff there. And I would love to have a deep look, just like we were calling for a deep look into suspensions for students. I'd love to have a deep look into why it is that SPED staff isn't sticking with their mission and what they care about, which is helping SPED students be part of the curriculum.
Thank you, Ofelia.
Well, this is an area that I've struggled with all my 30 years to find out what is the process, because there isn't any consistent process. The district definitely needs to invest more, but I don't think we need to. I think when we went virtual, it unveiled the systemic racism, and so we were also able to keep essential workers working. So I think if we did an audit of what we saved during that shutdown, that we would be able to identify some resources that could be reinvested in special education. Was there that second part?
It was about supporting students and supporting special education staff.
Yes, and I assisted at Aikens High School with the special ed department, and it's a very challenging job. So I would be interested to find out the ratio, because these workers are so committed and have specialized training, the teacher assistants that help out, that really want to be that teacher, but for whatever reason we're not able to, so they're able to still help out in special ed. So I think investing in more helping teacher assistants to become those teachers and we did that at one time with the district, where we were able to get the teacher pipeline, teacher assistants who wanted to be teachers, and were able to do that. So I think that's a way to also recruit more teachers for special education. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Ofelia, I'll give you a minute if you'd like to follow up. You were educated as someone with vision impairment. What have you learned, and what's your unique perspective that you would bring having had that experience yourself?
Well, I was not trained. Nobody ever knew. Nobody questioned why I wasn't reading. Nobody questioned why I wouldn't answer when they would tell me to read the board. All I did was cry. But what I am hearing from the visually impaired community is that the tablets are not working for the visually impaired students. There's still some challenges of the equipment that was purchased. One of my trainers said he researched the company, and they have no track record of having good tablets for the visually impaired. So they don't know why the district invested in something that has a company that has no track record. So there are, I would continue to work with the special needs students in all areas of special needs to ensure that they are getting the same quality education. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have 2 more questions tonight. Our next question is on racial justice and the request from the Equity Office for an equity assessment. There's an open request from Austin ISD's Equity Office for a third-party equity assessment of the district. Do you support an independent equity assessment for AISD? If not, why? If so, how do you hope that the district can implement this information? We're going to go to John, then Ofelia, and then Andy.
Does the district need a third-party equity audit? I think the contract for the Equity Office needs to be established and made permanent. I think the people in the Equity Office need to be able to feel safe in their jobs enough to help the equity audit, third-party equity audit, continue. I think there needs to be a third-party equity audit that can follow the finances in the bond proposals, that can follow the finances and the process for FabPack, that can sort of like discuss the way the boundaries are created, that allow some houses to be rated in neighborhoods neighborhoods connected to great schools that let know our higher research value, real estate values. I think an equity audit is key to be able to understand what ails the district, and it needs to be treated that way, like the key way to understand how to go forward. Now in COVID-19, when the inequalities between families who've never had a tablet and families who throw away tablets has been made clear, we need to have an equity audit that helps us move out of that situation to think about the kinds of resources we'll need when COVID-19 is a pandemic, is chronic in our situation, to be able to get people to move back and forth between tablets and schools. So yes, there needs to be a third-party equity audit, but there also needs to be education across schools to help understand what an equity audit is. It isn't just finances, it's also people's investments and sweat equity that they've put into schools, and that needs to be accounted in there, and people need to be given the skills to understand what an equity audit is.
Thank
So
you.
equity audit plus education.
Thank you. Now to Ofelia. Do you support an independent equity assessment for AISD? If not, why? If so, how do you hope that the district can implement this information?
Yes, I do support a third-party equity audit, and I think it's good to have someone outside of the district to be real open to everything that they need to review. The audit, I think, also would help us to see where our resources are being spent that are really not producing any results. For example, there's a big group of partners in education that have probably been getting grants from the district year after year after year. Well, I would really like that to be audited to see what has that done to help our students learn at high levels? What has it done to keep our students return? Because we keep hearing all the students we're losing to charter schools or losing for affordable housing. I think this audit could help us find out where we need to reinvest dollars, and we don't have to be hearing that there's a shortfall for special ed, there's a shortfall for paying hero pay. That I think this audit is very important to help us identify resources that we could reinvest in our schools and the gaps that need to be filled. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Andy?
Yes, I do support the third-party equity audit. I think that the equity office needs to be permanent because once this audit is complete, we're going to need somebody to kind of monitor and to kind of see how things progress at going forward to ensure that we are we are meeting those requirements. Certainly, I think that what we may discover in that audit is nothing that we probably didn't already know. but just like everything else, it all comes down to implementation. And I think that's where the equity office can really support and make sure that implementation gets done. I think that that as a district, this is something that's been long needed. People kind of talk about it, but nothing's really been done concrete. So I think that this is a key step for AISD really moving forward in understanding our district and to really help us to gain back those students that we may have lost to charter schools as well.
Thank you. Let me do a follow-up to all three of the candidates as to what is your definition of educational equity. We'll go in the same order. John, Ofelia, and Andy, take a minute to speak of what is your definition of equity as it regards to education. And we'll start with John.
You think I'd have an answer for that really quickly? Like, educational equity is this. I think thinking about educational equity means thinking about the journey that parents and students are doing to become part of a school. It means thinking about the kinds of effort, whether it's taking a bus or driving your Range Rover to school, taking that into account into the ways in which people are growing in the schools. It means going back to LBJ and his definition of equality. Equality isn't people starting at the same start line, but starting from different people, thinking about where people are able to prosper. Equity, it means thinking about the kinds of assets people bring into the conversation, bringing to school, and building from those assets into something, into a much more diverse and embracive and democratic culture. So educational equity is a process and the bridge.
Thank you, Ofelia.
Education equity for me is as I mentioned earlier, it's when you engage everyone, all stakeholders, to help participate, respect everybody's voice, and how to improve a community, how to improve that school, how do we build this community of learners that, you know, back in the days, they said it takes a village to raise a child. How do we go back to that kind of community where we really come together, and organizations and that also really respect each other and see each other, bring different skill sets and expertise so that we all have the same quality of education, that if my child was at Sanchez and is going over to the West Side School, that nothing's going to be different. It's just because she or he will be able to just continue studying because they are at the same level. That it's not the zip code you come from or the kind of money you have in the bank or don't have that dictate the kind of education you're going to get, but that everyone is given the same opportunity at high levels. Thank you.
Thank you. And Andy, what is your definition of equity as it relates to education?
My definition of educational equity is for any student to have the same access to resources and support to be successful. It doesn't matter where they are, where they're from, it doesn't matter about their race, their gender, their creed, but any student is able to get the resources that they need to be successful. Because in short, it's the good results and no excuses. Thank you.
Well, for our final question of the evening, what have you done individually? What have you done in the last 4 years to help the most underserved students in AISD? And what do you hope to accomplish in the next 4 years, assuming you're elected as trustee? We'll go with Ofelia, Andy, and John. What have you done in the last 4 years to help the most underserved students in AISD? And what do you hope to accomplish in the next 4 years? Ofelia.
Okay, so in the last 4 years, I was PTA president at Eastside Memorial. I was also part of the Houston Adopt-A-Park team in Dove Springs. And so this was Poverty Park, that we had the highest youth obesity in Dove Springs. At Houston was the highest obesity of the community. So it was important to build this community park so that their people can get more physically active. But we did that with all the 6 district parks in Dove Springs so that our students are healthy. They were not passing that gym test where they get tested on their exercises. And so we had to figure out as a community how to ensure that we support students becoming healthier. And that's how we were able to create the Go Austin, Vamos Austin initiative. In Eastside Memorial, I was able to bring in free physicals twice a year for the last 3 years with the partnership with the Community Care and Central Health. And then we brought in Martin students so they could also participate and get free physicals so they could participate in sports activities or be that cheerleader or be in band. So there's a lot of things that our students were lacking and they don't have a medical home. So that was our next step as part of this health and wellness initiative that got squashed, that we would connect them to a medical home so that they are always healthy and ready to learn. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now to Andy.
What I have done in the last 4 years for the district schools is, well, first of all, at my current job, we provide school supplies for a lot of the schools within Mendez and Rodriguez and Houston and other areas within the area. Serving on the Southeast Contact Team, which provides support for the neighborhoods and everything within the area. I've also worked with Austin Partners in Education, provide mentoring opportunities at Mendez to doing math teaching and coaching. I've served on many PTAs as far as being a member of each of the PTAs within the Dove Springs area, providing support at all those campuses since I've lived in this area. Have worked with other organizations and groups such as GABA and others to really kind of help bring parents together to help try to provide that support for their children. In the next 4 years, what I hope to accomplish is to really ensure that those resources that Dove Springs has been lacking, that they get, so that we can really build up Dove Springs and build up District 2 as it should have been all along, and not seem like the third party left behind when it's all said and done, so that we can make our district great again. Thank you.
Thank you. And now to John, what have you done in the last 4 years to help the most underserved students in AISD? And what do you hope to accomplish in the next 4 years if you're elected trustee?
What have I done in the last 4 years? Well, part of it is in what have you been involved in. My kid is a 5th grader. We started in Dawson 3 years ago, and the process of becoming involved means learning ways of getting involved. When I was at Travis Heights, I helped with legal counseling for people in mixed status families to negotiate their situations. I did translation for families that needed translation in there at the time, and I participated in immigrants' rights organizations. A year ago, my involvement in the district was completely accelerated by the threat to close our school and then to close neighboring schools and to close schools across the district. And I have to say that our family has been fully occupied in trying to figure out ways to slow or stop the closures of schools. So one of the ways I have been involved and plan to be involved is, of course, running for trustees to bring out the inequities of the school closures, the inequities of D2 to the conversation. Over the next 4 years, I hope to be able to bring my history and my teaching experience, my commitment to issues that shape D2, the resources that they need to be able to thrive, the dual language programs that are working really well at the elementary school level and build them up, building a much more, pushing for a much more SPED-oriented curriculum to incorporate more people, and I guess, vote against any proposal to close schools again and move along that way. But really, I would say SPED, dual immersion, and getting the kinds of resources and mentoring and engagement and entanglement that both my candidates have done so well over the last 20 years, to which I want to say, I hope to be as involved in the future, whether I win or not, as the two of you have.
Well, let me thank all three of our candidates for taking their evening to spend with us. I really appreciate you speaking with us and all the time that you have obviously put in. I know that running for school board is a full-time job with no salary, and it's a service to the community, so thank you all for being willing to do that. We are AISD for All, and we hope that this forum has been helpful in helping you understand the candidates and where they stand. Please share these videos with any voters that you know in D2. We want an informed electorate heading to the polls. This year in October, early voting starts a week early. That's October 13th. You can do in-person voting for 3 weeks leading up to the election. And if you are in D2, you also have the opportunity to vote in D8, the at-large race. We'll be hosting a forum next Thursday night at 7 p.m. Again, you can find our forums live at facebook.com/AISDforall/videos. And then after the event, we're going to be clipping out this into different questions. So if there's one thing you really want to focus on, you can share those videos with your communities of voters by going to AISDforall.org/voter-guide. Again, AISDforall.org/voter-guide. Thank you all again, the candidates.
Okay.
We really appreciate you being here, and best of luck to you all.
Thank you.